So when you're learning Illustrator, and if you want to do anything serious with Illustrator, you need to learn the pen tool. So let's go ahead and just open a new file. And so here we have this. And so the pen tool is really important. It's a little weird to get the hang of, but whether you want to be an illustrator or an animator or a designer, you need to understand the pen tool. It's used by a lot of people in a lot of different ways. And it works similar in other programs too. So first, let's go ahead and click on the pen tool. So here it is. You can see if I hold down, here are my choices. And let's get started. So if I click just anywhere, I'm not going to hold down and drag, I'm just going to click. Let's move this over just to make it a little easier to see. So click, and if I click again, I'm not holding down, I'm just clicking. It creates a segment between the 2 points. Now if I click and I hold down and I drag, now I get a curve and I've got the little handle sticking out there. And if I click somewhere else, it'll make another curve influenced by the previous one. And if I click again, I have a segment. Now if I use the black arrow selection tool, then you can see what I have here, and I can move it around if I want, but I've got a couple segments. I've got this kind of flowing piece, another segment there. Now this segment here is actually, that's 2 segments, but it looks very flowy. It looks kind of like one line, right? Now let's zoom in just a little bit. Move this over. And I've got these points, right? Let me switch to my direct selection tool, the white arrow. And if I click on these points now with this tool, I can manipulate these points. I can move them around. And we call this an anchor, actually, and you can see it says anchor right above it. Now, we have 2 different types of anchors. We have a corner, or, see, so there you can see it there. And you have the same one down there too. That's also another corner. But we can change that to smooth, like so. And now it's kind of this flowy, extended line thing going on, where it's flowing around different anchors and smooth. And so now it looks like kind of like one big segment here, and then we've got the other corner down there that looks sort of like a different segment. And we can switch that to smooth if we want as well, like so. And so now it flows around that point as well, and just little other lines to make it work. Now that we've made it smooth, we also have these little handles here that we can manipulate and drag it around and change how much it's applying, how much pressure or force it's applying around that angle. It's going to take some getting used to. You're going to be able to create some really weird things with it, and when you're first starting out, things will not behave the way that you expect, and it's going to take some time. But it's something to play with and to get to know. Now let's just switch back to my regular selection tool. Something else I want to mention. So right now you have this line, right? And you don't really think of it as a shape, but Illustrator still thinks of it as a shape. So if we choose a fill color, now we've got this weirdness kind of going on here, right? So let's just put that back the way it was to no fill. Now what if you want to change the color of this line? Well, why isn't fill working? Well, it's not really fill. We think of fill, but it's not fill, because right now it's just a path with a color around it. So we're really talking not about the fill, which, as I showed you, does weird things, creates a shape out of it even if you didn't close the shape. Instead, we're talking about the stroke. So that here. Now I need to make it a little bit thicker so you can actually see what's going on. But now that I have a thick stroke, if I change the color, you can see it works. Now this is a solid color right now, but we could even change this down here to like a gradient, or even no fill if we'd wanted to. Or no stroke, that is. And so you can see the line here, and that's nice, but not super important right now. But it's important that you understand how that works. Now we can modify the gradient over here too if we want to, but once again the gradient part isn't that important right now. It's just important that you kind of understand how this works. And we can change the colors of the gradients. Switch this to RGB also, and there's a nice pink color, and we can add in some other handles into here if we want to. Add some additional colors. Maybe a yellowish color. That's not very yellow. There we go. It's getting a little more yellow. There we go. That's yellow. So we have a gradient, right? But that's not very useful. That's not very useful for actual practice. So if we really want to learn the pen tool, a great thing to do is actually to work with type. So I'm grabbing the type tool here, and I'm just going to write out a couple words, maybe my name or something, and I'm going to try to recreate it using the pen tool, and this is really a great way to practice. Now, I'm just going to write it out, and then I can increase the size in a moment. Let's grab the handle. Oh, I didn't hold shift. Let's try this again, holding shift to constrain the proportions. There we go. Much, much better. So, something like that. Now, this is a very simple font. We're using a sans serif font. Very simple lines, but this is a good way to start. I'm just going to copy and paste, and let's find a different font here, and this can be a more difficult one to practice with once I finish the first. So maybe something like that. That's maybe a little more complex than I want. Let's try something not quite so hard. Maybe Tahoma? No, that one's too easy. What else do we have? Let's just click through. Actually, that one looks pretty good. I think we'll do this one. Not too bad. So I'm going to zoom in and scroll over just to make it a little bit easier to see. That looks pretty good to me. We can get rid of that, and we can get rid of that. And I'm going to lock this layer. I'm going to make a new layer. And now I'm going to actually start working with the pen tool. So I'm on my new layer just so it doesn't conflict with the previous one. And I'm just going to start connecting kind of the points. So this one's really easy, the W. Depending on what letter your name starts with or what letter you're starting with for whatever word, this may be harder or easier. I'm going to add in some color so it's easier for me to see what I'm doing. And now I can see a little bit better what I'm doing as I'm connecting these points and making sure that my lines are looking the way I want them to. So once again, W, really easy, just connecting the points. Now I'm going around the outside of the letter, and that's how the letters are formed actually. It is an outline with a fill inside, so it's important, in my opinion, to do the same. Let's maybe fill it with kind of a purplish color, and maybe make this a little bit easier to see against it, maybe a little bit deeper. I don't know, something like that. Now if we click our selection tool, and we click on our W, well, actually, no, it's fine. Yeah, you can see it decently. So now the E. So I'm kind of clicking around the semicircle of the E and dragging it around to try to get the right shape, try to match up the edge of it with the edge of the actual E. And this is tricky. It's going to take you a little while to get the hang of it, but you have to start somewhere. Get rid of the fill so I can see what I'm doing. And just keep looking around. That part down there is not quite right, and I'll fix it in a moment. Now go up here, and yeah, that's pretty close. And then it'll end there, and that's real wonky. So we can go in and modify that. So go to our direct selection tool, click on these anchors, switch them from corner to, well, from round, from smooth to corner, and that's not what I want. So if I click and hold down my pen, I can add another point. And I can drag this where it needs to go, and it's still wonky because it's a corner, but I can switch that to smooth. Now I can try to fix this. There we go. Starting to look a little better. This one needs to be a corner also, maybe, but I might be able to adjust it enough. Maybe. This part looks decent. Now I just need to do the inside of the E, right? So I'm going to draw, oops, let's switch this back to the regular pen. I'm going to draw this inside part, so maybe about halfway. And then around the other chunk there. I always like to do mine being kind of like about 15 minutes on a clock face, about 1/4 of a circle. That tends to work very well to me. And we'll switch that to corner, and we'll grab this handle and try to get that to look right. Looks pretty good. So now we can actually make this E. So we'll colorize the inside of this, or give it a fill color. And we'll give this a fill color. Right now they're the same, but if we switch colors, Now we can see the E. Now right now that white is actually a fill color. I don't want it to be white inside, I want it to actually be empty. So I'm going to open up my Pathfinder window, and I'm going to have both selected, and I'm going to subtract front or minus fronts. And there we go. Now this is an E with an empty eyelet there. And I can modify that a little bit more if it doesn't quite look the way that I intended. And I can play with all the little different handles here and there to get it to look just the way that I want to. And making these adjustments can be a little tricky. Right now it's kind of jumping a little bit more than I want it to. Maybe if I zoom in, it might be a little easier to get to go exactly where I want. Pull this handle here. Maybe up here adjust this a little bit. Just to try to get the font to look the way that it does. Pull this out a little bit there. Yeah, it's getting there. It's getting there. And of course I could always remove the fill or make it invisible, remove the stroke, to try to see it without too. So now we can begin on the B, and actually the bottom of that B is interesting because it kicks out just a little bit. You see it down there? Just a little bit of a kick. So anyways, I can go through and I can just work on trying to get these shapes with the pen tool to match what the font looks like. And this is a great way to practice. We'll drag this out here, trying to get kind of the edge of the B here. Just keep moving around. Now my stroke, or the fill, is in the way, so we'll get rid of the fill. And now I can see where I need to click better. And we'll adjust that handle in a minute. So now we can go back and click on this anchor and adjust that handle down here. And about there-ish, and so I need to move that one over a little bit. Just kind of adjusting these until they look about right. That's a little off. That might be a little high now, but we'll adjust the kick. Zoom in so we can try to edit a little bit more minutely. And try to adjust this. It's kind of snapping more than I want. I might need to adjust the snaps. Try moving that over a little bit. Yeah, that's not the amount I want. Yeah, let's go up here and adjust the snaps. So we'll take snap to point off. And now this should let me adjust it a little bit easier without jumping around as much. That helps a little bit. Zoom in to really get it where I want. There we go. And I want to move this just a little bit because it still wasn't quite right before. It's still too much. Maybe there-ish. And does this, no, this anchor needs to come out just a little bit to get that kick as well. There we go. That's better. So I'm just going to keep doing this. I'm going to work myself all the way around this font, from letter to letter, and then when I feel ready, I'm going to move to the next one. Now, if I don't quite feel ready after this, I could try a different word. I could try the alphabet. But once I feel comfortable enough, then I'm going to move to the font below, which is a little bit more complex. Wow, that's way wonky. Should I even modify, or should I just think I'm just going to start over? We'll try this from a different angle, so maybe there and here. Sometimes it's better to start over. So I'm going to keep working through this and try to get everything to look right the way that I want. That's pretty good. And these need to actually be corners right here. Now that one needs to be smooth though, so go back to that one to be smooth, and we can pull that anchor or that handle out of that anchor. And adjust that a little bit, and that's alright. We're getting there. It takes time.